welcome to World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing on CCTV News. I'm your host, Tian Wei. On today's program, ahead of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to China, we examine China-Russia relationship. Is it a marriage of convenience, as some critics have charged? And we sit down with Sania Udayeva, the first deputy governor of the Central Bank of Russia, for a discussion of the Russian economy. Will China play a role in that recovery? And we start today's show with a preview of Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to China. On Saturday, the Russian leader will arrive in Beijing to meet his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping and some other top officials. In an era when both countries are forging a more economically integrated Eurasia, the visit is seen to be of great significance by many. Earlier, at the 20th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, I talked to Dmitry Pankin, chairman of the management board at Eurasian Development Bank, and also Xu Sitao, chief economist and partner from Deloitte China. They shared with us how China and Russia can cooperate and compete in the same international arena. Before we go to our interview, let's take a look at this.
An important guest for Beijing will soon arrive on Saturday. The two leaders will plan the development, direction, and top priority cooperation areas of China-Russia coordination. The Kremlin has more than 30 projects on the table.
China hopes that Putin's upcoming visit will consolidate mutual political and strategic trust, promote pragmatic cooperation in various areas, inject new impetus to bilateral ties, and to international and regional peace, security, and stability.
Among all issues, economic cooperation tops the agenda. A $6.2 billion high-speed rail deal is expected to be inked. Investment projects are also under negotiation. What's drawing the two geographically close powers even closer is their shared vision for an integrated Eurasian future. The China-led Belt and Road initiatives offer a wider connection of European and Asian countries through infrastructure construction and trade links. The Russia-backed Eurasian Economic Union, now including Russia and 4 other member countries, introduces economic coordination in the region and is planning to include China.
I think the strength of the Euro-Asian Union is that this is the first union in the post-Soviet space with real chances for development, as opposed to many other unions. Secondly, the Euro-Asian Economic Union is a bridge between Asia and Europe and China.
This year marks the 15th anniversary of the signing of the Sino-Russian Good Neighborly Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation. Analysts believe that bilateral ties have reached a golden era, both economically and politically. Personal ties between Putin and Xi also remain strong. Xi traveled to Moscow for his first state visit after taking office, and the two have met over 10 times since then. Driven by these high-level personal ties, China-Russia cooperation is expected to develop further, especially after Putin's trip to Beijing.
Welcome to both of you, Dmitry Pankin, chairman of the board with Eurasian Development Bank, and also Xu Sitao, China economist with Deloitte China. Welcome.
Thank you.
There are a lot of things going on. One of the things is people are talking about some competing mechanisms, at least in their eyes. For example, Eurasian Economic Union, OBOR, One Belt, One Road. People are saying, what does it mean, cooperation or competition?
Thanks. I think reality is not like black and white. We have both competition and cooperation. As a competition, we are, as a development bank, we are competing to finding a good project. Really, it's difficult now to find not only idea how to spend money, but good project that could generate good return. And it's very interesting for us to find project, and we are very happy if our bank will be first to find that project. But again, when we have project, it's interesting to share risk. And from that point of view, we are trying to find partners, other development bank with whom we could cooperate, with who co-finance these projects. So again, it's kind of mixture. It's cooperation and competition.
Is Mr. Pankin being diplomatic?
No, I entirely agree with him. There are many shades. so you do have collaboration, competition, and cooperation. At the same time, we need to bear in mind, OBOR is not an investment project, it's a vision.
It is a vision. Interesting. Yeah. Having said that, though, you were suggesting the Eurasian Economic Union is trying to find projects that would make a profit. There are some challenges over there. Some might ask the other way around. Does that mean the vision itself, also back to the vision thing, has some original challenges to begin with?
Original challenge, you mean?
For example, geopolitics within the region. Eurasian countries, we all know, not necessarily everybody is thinking in the same thing.
Yeah,
secondly,
sure.
Everybody has their own priorities. They have interesting relations in history with Russia. And fourthly, there are different kinds of competitors in this region. European Union also want to have their own version of Eurasian as well. So is this idea viable from the very beginning?
You know, I think if we are talking about economic links, this is our most important part of our activity. So economy bring our country that we need some cooperation, we need common market, we need common standards, we need common, let's say, rules of game. And so we have a lot of reason for cooperation and a lot of reason for integration in our case. Of course, integration process is not very difficult, and you're completely right that there are different geopolitical games, different interests between countries. So again, it's kind of a mixture of, there are some reason for cooperation, there are some reason for integration, economic reason, and of course we have some particular interest of different countries and we have some contradiction, of course.
Same with OBOR, One Belt, One Road. Yeah. You said earlier it is a vision, yes indeed, but how to implement the vision? We have seen some initiatives, but not necessarily the overall project has been nailed down. So what do you make of this?
Well, I think quite often people don't understand OBOR. They feel if there OBOR, there will be influx of cheap Chinese capital into a certain region. I don't think that's the case. I believe the essence of OBOR is about replicating China's growth model, which means if you have good infrastructure, you lay a foundation for further economic development. So it's not about particular country, it's really about replicating that part of the growth model.
But is that viable? I mean, on the other hand, because some of the economies, obviously, along the road of OBOR are not necessarily at this moment as developed as China is. They have not shorn up the cash over the years as China did over the past 30 years of reform and opening up. So how well can this model be copied, following just your theory?
Well, it's not easy. In fact, if you study economic history, it's actually not easy to find a compelling case for generating good returns purely from infrastructure. That's why you need to explore other business models. That's why you need to have certain competition. This cannot be done just by China or by any other country.
Even infrastructure itself, Mr. Pankin, has its own challenges for development banks like yours. For example, you are now working on a project. It's a tram rail project inside Russia between cities and among cities, rather than a project among countries in the Eurasian Economic Union. So does that mean, Mr. Pankin, some would say, that you're already finding difficulties outside Russia, the appropriate projects? All you can do now is pretty much defined by Russia's own border.
My shareholders' task that I have from my shareholders to find project that links countries. So it could be not tram or railway inside Russia. It should be tram or railway that connect Russia and Kazakhstan, Russia and Belarus.
But now it's all in Russia at this moment, this specific railway for now.
Which one?
The specific railway that you are considering in investing among various cities inside Russia. Is that going to go beyond the border?
First for us, it's a fine kind of railway that connects country. If you are talking about a specific project inside Russia, about tram or railway, we are now not financing any railway project inside Russia. For example, we have some road project, road project around Moscow, road project. But rail project, for us, we have rail project is across border Russia and Kazakhstan.
Very interesting. On the other hand, we have also seen some interesting cooperations between China and Russia about the visions, OBOR and also Eurasian Economic Union. But the question is, it seems that the top leaders of both countries, both President Putin and also President Xi Jinping, are very enthusiastic about these kind of cooperations. And yet when it nails down to specifics, when it nails down to grassroots implementations, there is still a question mark. Mr. Xu.
Yes, I think a lot of people they talk about have very ambitious goals, but so far patience is not being realized. But we have to put that in proper context. In the past 2 years, we have experienced quite a protracted global economic slowdown and frequent financial crises in many countries. International trade is facing a lot of challenges. So you really need to put that in context. So I wouldn't just say you only have top-down directions.
Mr. Pankin, you know in Russia you have this pivot to Asia, in a way, strategy also from Russia, even though that was a word invented by Washington a few years ago. Of course, later they refused to use that phrase, use it a much more PR phrase instead. But Russia's, of course, your version of pivot to Asia is very different from the US one. Help us to understand what exactly is Russia's vision about Asia and about Eurasia, so that investors will have a better understanding about whether this is viable, this is sustainable.
You know, my feeling that it's maybe for Russia, it's not useful question. Is it Asia or Europe? Should we cooperate with Asia or should we cooperate with Europe? Question is to find our place in existing world. We have now Trans-Pacific partnership. Yes, we have now transatlantic partnership. So very strong, very powerful, potentially very powerful integration structure. And question is for our country, where we are. How could we find our place in very competitive world? And in that case, it's necessary to find right way to cooperate between country in Eurasia, not only, let's say, not only cooperate with China, not only cooperate with India, but find way to cooperate with all countries in our area. Without this, we cannot survive, I think.
That's a very nice way you are explaining things. That's exactly where the challenge is out of the way. Before we figure out a way of cooperating, we have to tell people what the visions are. At this moment, many say the working together, the cooperation between China and Russia is a relationship of convenience. After all, Russia from the West, Russia wants to get closer to Asia. China, the same, want to get closer to Russia, and also wonderful commodities coming from Russia, as well as the traditional friendship with Russia. But all of these, they say, will that be sustainable? Investors really care about this. Mr. Pankin.
You mentioned that, for example, sanction problem, and my feeling that sanction it's kind of temporary. It's not sustainable. Sustainable question is find economic reason. Find long-term cooperation.
Yes, but yes, indeed. But sanctions, in a way, gives Russia the incentive of cooperating or more with other countries. For example, China. And people are wondering if the overall geopolitical situation change a bit, will that continue? We've seen that with the oil prices debates going on between sometimes up, sometimes down, depending on the outside environment. So will that be also the same when it comes to this Eurasian development?
Yeah. Again, my feeling that this is temporary. So more sustainable problem. What is how Russian economy could cooperate with Chinese economy? Is it only will be the way that Russian energy resources, Russian oils will be supported, supplied to China, and from going back, where will be buy Chinese clothes or Chinese electronics. So this is a problem. How to
what do you think
future?
the answers are?
My feeling that not only trade, my feeling that it's necessary to go more for investment type of activities. It will be very interesting to rise volume of investment from Chinese company to Russia and from Russian company to China. Not pure trade pattern like energy supply, Russia energy supply and China is supply for, let's say, clothes or electronics.
I see. Very interesting point. Mr. Xu, I have to ask further on that road. Yes, invest into Russia. Many Chinese investors, as you may know very well, are very enthusiastic about this. In fact, Mr. Pankin, for example, in the Far East, there has been some preferential policies coming from Russia to do that. But there are certain things investors are looking at. Whether you got cheaper labor, whether you got, in a way, more cooperative policies, including environment and many others, and also whether it is sustainable and secure. When looking at these issues, Chinese investors, particularly private investors, scratching their head and say, well, this looked great in the Far East, but, Mr. Xu, they also said, many of your friends said so as well, that looking at the European countries, probably they're going to have a better return there. So why not there instead of into the Far East?
Right.
These are viable questions.
Yeah. So for private Chinese companies, the investment decision wouldn't be dictated or sanctioned by top leaders. That's true. It's going to be driven by economic factors. That is why I think for Russia, you need to go beyond resources. I believe Russia already looking into agriculture. That's going to be a very interesting area because as China is undergoing this transformation, we really have to change the way we manage our economy. So industry sector may have to shrink, but consumer sector is going to be very vibrant. Outbound tourism is going to be booming, already booming. So I think all this Russia has to take into account. And I also think Chinese companies, cultural factors, they may have to work with Chinese. So immigration policy may have to result in certain adjustment. So we find out.
Well, we'll find out. But Mr. Pankin, it is no secret that the business community have been pushing for all these changes. Do you think the bureaucracy and also the system will be able to cooperate in the short term?
You know, we have both countries, China and Russia, we have a serious problem with bureaucracy, and this is again our common challenge from our business community.
Yeah, so from the Russian side, what about that?
From Russia, it's better question for Chinese company how they assess Russian bureaucracy and do they see some change. Of course, from inside, as previous I was a bureaucrat as a Minister of Finance, we think that we made a lot of improvement, but it's better that investor will assess do we have real improvement or not.
At this moment, the state-owned investors are very enthusiastic at this moment about development in Russia and also cooperating with other development banks, such as the one that Mr. Pankin comes from. For example, China Development Bank. And also Export-Import Bank. Yes, Exim Bank from China. When you look at these banks and the role of, let's just say, AIIB, which is also a new initiative. What likely, from your understanding,
well,
Mr.
First of all, Development Bank
divisions.
is a policy bank.
Of
Exim
course.
Bank is a policy bank. AIIB is not a policy bank. AIIB is a multi-national organization.
Like Eurasian Development Bank.
Right. So they are different. I think for development banks, I think they will be following government's general directions, but not AIIB.
We see development banks following their directions, for example, and also state-owned ones following the directions of the policies. Gazprom was originally, a few years ago, getting 400 billion in a way business deal with China after the high-level exchanges back in the year 2014. But of course, with the economic and sanction situation, things have changed. So is the commodity prices. So the question is, even the state-owned enterprises and companies as enthusiastic as they used to be, or exactly the other way around, there will be even more Mr. Pankin?
Even more.
Even more enthusiastic about this kind of cooperation. What is your assessment?
You know, my assessment that sanction is not a very serious question.
Yeah, it's not just about sanctions. It's also about the business environment in one another. It's also about commodity prices. It's also about ruble and the neutral assessment of each other's economy.
Of course, commodity is a serious question for us. If I talk about Russia and investors in Russia, if I see drop in energy price, drop in oil, raw materials, we have this impact in many other areas of our economy, and we see feeling of investors that now in, for example, car industry, a lot of projects are stopped. Projects are started by foreign investors because market is shrinking, and the same story in, for example, rail engine or kind of wagon production. Demand is shrinking and a lot of investment are stopped. So from that point of view, oil affects seriously potentially foreign investment in Russia.
Mr. Xu, what about your assessment, the potential?
For Russia or for China?
For China, of course, we in cooperation with Russia.
I think for China right now, no one can forecast commodity prices and predict oil price, always very volatile. But it seems to me, in the medium term, I think for Chinese companies, energy sector remains the most interesting one for further investment.
What about the future? I mean, we see AIIB going to have their first ever board meeting, international board meeting. Of course, Eurasian Economic Development Bank, you are also doing very well. So what about the future? Where are we going to start with? I think that is the most important thing, Mr. Pankin.
I'll start cooperation with the AIIB. For us, it will be very interesting. And we send a lot of proposals for AIIB, a lot of projects that we think should be co-financed. Problem, I think, you know, AIB is emerging bank. They need now to create procedure, internal operation standard. Very serious question is government guarantee. So approved policy by AIB is to finance project only with government guarantee. And for example, in Russia, Russian government, Russian Ministry of Finance has very strict rules for issuing guarantee. It's not very easy to get guarantee, and typically investment projects are financed without government guarantee. And for example, we are financing all projects in Russia without government guarantee. European Bank for Reconstruction and Development financing project without government guarantee. So my opinion that will be necessary to find a way how to cooperate, but this issue, government guarantee, will be a serious one.
Mr. Xu?
Yes, in a way, Chinese investment tend to put a huge premium on government guarantee, but AIIB is not a Chinese entity.
There are so many different players out there, including Russia as well as a member, not necessarily in the board though. But having said that though, I want to go, before we wrap up the program, with further questions about this cooperation and competition issue. We talk about the Eurasian Economic Union Development Bank, and we talk about the AIIB. There's even more, the new development bank formed by all the emerging economies, including Russia and China. SCO is talking about the idea of really elaborating on its own development bank. So money is there, but money is still limited. We've got so many entities looking for money and looking for. How is it likely to be? Mr. Xu, I want you to go first, and then Mr. Pankin.
Well, right now there's a surplus of saving from China.
Certainly.
To a certain extent, the surplus of saving due to the fact our financial system is inefficient. So I think as financial liberalization reform deepen, and we may not have such a lot of saving. But in the short term, yes, there's a surplus saving.
Okay. Mr. Pankin?
Mr.
Xu was saying there's money out there.
We have money and we have surplus of saving in Russia, and many of development bank has kind of surplus. Again, for our case, we have a lot of cash question for us to find where to invest.
Yes.
This is the most important question. That's why my feeling that the question is not to start some kind of new banks and gain some many banks. Most interesting question to find suitable project.
All right, this is coming from a big fish in the pool already.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dmitry Pankin, coming from the Eurasian Development Bank, and Xu Sitao from the Deloitte China. Really appreciate, gentlemen, for being with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And stay with us here on World Insight. We got our final segment coming right up. We sit down with Ksenia Udayeva, the first deputy governor of the Central Bank of Russia, for a discussion of the Russian economy. Will China play a role in that recovery? Welcome back. And now we continue our focus on Russia for this edition of our program. The EU is considering extending the sanctions on Russia until January. As a key trade partner and energy provider to the EU, Russia has been these last 2 years. Earlier, I interviewed Ksenia Udayeva, the first deputy governor of the Central Bank of Russia, at the 20th St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. She spoke about how the Russian government and central bank have responded to the sanctions and on growing trade ties with China. But first, let's take a look at this.
The pressure of ongoing sanctions. In 2014, the European Union and the United States accused Russia of annexing Crimea. The West punished Russia with economic sanctions and expelled it from the G8 group of nations. The lowest point saw the ruble depreciate by almost 50% against the US dollar. Many Russians, however, remain positive about their economy.
Our main ingredient, crab, is produced locally and comes from Russia's Far East, so we haven't suffered any damage there. But as for all the vegetables, especially the rare kinds, these we used to get from foreign importers.
On the other hand, the sanctions also dealt a heavy blow on the EU. The longer they are in place, the more difficult it will be for the German companies to reclaim their market share, observers say.
I wouldn't be surprised if we were to find other players occupying the Russian market 3 or 4 years from now.
The EU is considering whether to extend the energy, financial and defense sanctions until the end of January. Some EU politicians are urging a softer stance, led by Germany and Italy, while Britain and some Baltic states are more hawkish.
Ms. Ksenia Udayeva, welcome to CCTV News.
Oh, thank you for asking me to come.
What do you make of the role of a central bank, such as the central bank that you are working for, in a time when you have sanctions and at a time when the pillar of your industry and economy, the oil price, is dropping so dramatically?
Well, you know, we actually introduced a set of policy which helped the economy to adjust quite quickly to this new situation. You know, in 2014, at the end of 2014, we speed up our plans of going to floating exchange rate and inflation targeting.
But we still do not see necessarily the stability of ruble. Are you worried about that?
Well, we do not of oil prices, unfortunately, right? And given that major fundamental for our economy, which is the price of oil, is so volatile, our currency is also volatile. But actually this year it's much less volatile than the oil.
Yes.
So from this perspective, it is stabilizing.
Central bankers are the one who is the most cautious about the economic prospect. They always worry about something. So if I could use the word at least concern, what are your concerns? Is it about the ultimate goal of restructuring the economy, which your economy has to do? Or is it about trying to stimulate the economy to an extent so it look great on paper? What exactly is it? Or is it about the inflation that we all know is existing here in this country?
Well, you know, as a central bank, We are, of course, concerned with inflation, but it's both sort of tactical and strategic goal. Our strategic goals to implement measures within our mandate, which will help the economy to increase its growth potential. Not only to increase its growth rate slightly this year to compensate it with a slower growth next year because we accumulate more problems, right? But release growth potential to improve prospects for longer-term balanced growth. Our economy is strong enough, and actually measures which we can introduce to increase growth potential will allow it to grow even with sanctions.
Of course, we're seeing Mr. Runka coming from the EU are at this year's St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. He meeting with President Putin. Do you expect, from the central bank governor's perspective, sanctions likely to be lessened much further by the end of the year? What would that mean for your economy when you're doing the central planning at this moment for the future plan of the central bank? Have you counted all those factors into your consideration?
Well, we don't have to prepare ourselves anymore because we already introduced a number of measures which allow the economy to adjust. We just have to continue doing what we are doing, right, and monitor the risks which can appear in the economy. And risks of all sorts.
What do you make so far as a central bank governor of the role of the government and the role of the market in the current Russian economy?
We just had a session on macroeconomic policy and policy of the government, and we discussed the fact that economy slowed down already in 2012, 2013, so before all those geopolitical events and before oil price decline. So the government needs to think about sets of measures which will help to improve growth potential. We need private initiative and entrepreneurships to develop, to blossom, to speed up growth in our economy, and it should be one of the priorities for the government, for sure.
Neighbors and business partners. China and Russia are looking to boost their economic cooperation even further. But fluctuating oil prices and the depreciation of Russia's currency, the ruble, make for a tough business environment. Those conditions meant bilateral trade slid by almost a third in 2015. But as the first signs of growth emerge in the first quarter of this year, a 6% rise year-on-year, experts estimate volumes may reach $70 billion by the end of the year. But the cheap ruble isn't all bad news, especially for Russian-made products. In the years, the share of Russian exports to China compared to its own imports of Chinese goods has been sliding, but now it nearly evened up. In May this year, China exported over $3 billion worth of goods to Russia and imported just under $3 billion of Russian-made produce. Russia and China have also discussed setting up an offshore Chinese currency center in Moscow and possibly appointing a clearing yuan capital there too, to help improve the quality of trading relations.
Emerging economies, even the central banks of the emerging economies have been working together for quite some time. But emerging economies are all facing problems at this moment, even the Chinese economy. Many of our challenges are about restructuring our economy and also about looking for new potentials of growth. You know that better than anybody else, I'm sure. So what do you make of the current stage of Russia's looking for the next potential for growth? Is it still energy, or is it something else? How are you preparing for it?
At this level of oil prices, we understand we have to diversify. We just cannot grow on energy and on some other raw materials which we used to export.
But you know what? People forget. Once the prices come up, they're going to forget all of these crises and challenges.
Well, but they really have to come up quite a lot, because right now, even if price has increased, it's still twice as low than in 2015. Actually, we look on China from this perspective, with a lot of interest, because China is a huge market. It's the second largest market in the world. Maybe you will be the first one sometime soon, and we think that we can develop tighter ties with China and with Asia more generally in terms of exporting some goods there.
Well, certainly there's a lot of initiatives that could be for cooperation in the future, but when it comes to cooperation with the Russian part, there are several kinds of concerns. For example, bureaucracy, for example, corruption, for example, efficiency. These are all issues facing the Chinese businesses. They are here for profits, or they want to welcome you into the Chinese market also for profits. From the central bank's perspective, all those are hard habits, difficult to die?
Yes, but it's possible to work on them, and it's a trend that matters. Probably there is no overnight solution, but if we keep working on this problem, it will eventually get smaller and smaller and less a problem for business.
And before we go, I do want to have your views on future prospect of cooperation, particularly with your President Putin visiting China very soon, and also the upcoming G20 summit later in China in September. What can be the areas and that you are very excited about?
First of all, we're very excited about building links between our financial sector and your financial sector. We are about to sign several agreements or memoranda with the Central Bank of People's Bank of China on different issues regarding cooperation in the sphere of infrastructure, financial infrastructure development, national currencies, payments, and so on. So we're working a lot on that. We are also quite excited with the prospects of issuing the first Russian government bond in Chinese RMB sometime this year or maybe early next year. We also think that it will link our financial markets and economy more closely together. And speaking of G20, well, I think that you have a very great and ambitious agenda for G20. There are some issues which are very interesting for emerging markets. As far as the central bank is concerned, definitely all this work on macroprudential measures is very interesting and important for us. But there is also this work on infrastructure financing, small business financing, and climate financing, right? So there are many things, not only on financial regulation, but on financial development initiated by China, and we are looking forward to see how this will develop and what results we will have.
Ksenia Yudaeva, the first Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Russia. Thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much as well.
That is from St. Petersburg. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more of our program, visit our website. Just type in World Insight CCTV News into your search engine. You will be able to find us, where you can also check out our YouTube channel. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone at the World Insight team, thanks for watching, and tune in again tomorrow for more insights from across China and around the world. Good night.